Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Riot, Mean Streets, out May 10th on Atomic Fire Records. The album has 12 tracks, 52 minutes in length, and this is the band's 17th full-length studio album. They are an American heavy metal band. Now when it comes to the design, the overall structure of this record, the first half of the album is very dynamic, it's very fluid, it offers the right ebbs and flows in order for you to stay connected with the album and really feel engaged by it. It's an album that offers a great journey, a great path, moving you up and down, but always pushing you forward. Once you get into the second half of the album, you start to ask yourself, are we there yet? Because the album starts to lose a little bit of that direction and it starts to lose a little bit of that purpose, which allows the listener to disconnect from the record, and the album is almost playing at a distance. And I think the reason for that is the length. 52 minutes is a really long time for a record like this. I felt like the album could be a little bit more compact, a little bit shorter, more to the point, which would allow the overall playability to stay really high. Because it's not like the songs on the second half of the album are not as good as the songs in the first half. The quality is there. This is a very balanced album from a quality standpoint. It's just that the more you listen to it, the more difficult it becomes for you to tell the forest from the trees. The more difficult it becomes for you to find the individualities within the songs, because everything starts to sound or feel very similar to one another. The sense of equality across these songs starts to blur the listener's vision, and everything becomes a little bit less defined. So it's an album that has quality across all the individual tracks, but it loses itself in its own length. A little bit shorter, a little bit more compact. It could still be as dynamic as it is, but it would have a lot more playability and a much longer shelf life. As far as the sound goes, I love the production on this record, because this is an album that on one hand, it sounds old school, but it doesn't necessarily sound old school. And what I mean by that is not dated. When you listen to this record, you cannot say that this album has been stuck in a time capsule. You cannot say that this record could have been released 20, 30 years ago. That's not the case. The album has a modern touch to it when it comes to the production, when it comes to the sound, that allows you to see all the individual elements that compose the sound and the sonic experience of the album. That's very modern when it comes to a more classic heavy metal band like this. But at the same time, the way the guitar sound comes across, the way the vocals sound on this album are all old school elements. Even some of the songs, their structures, the construction, the textures and the sound. There's a lot of old school elements in this record, which is part of the DNA of the band. And I enjoy the fact that they kept that DNA, that they're not changing who they are, but they're, perfecting the sound around them so that you can create an old school experience without necessarily forcing the album to be dated. I think this is also a great quality, because when you press play on this record, it doesn't matter if it's now, 10 years from now, it's going to sound pretty fresh. It has a fresh look, a fresh sound, a fresh experience to it, and a lot of that obviously comes from the production, but a lot of that comes from the overall sound quality that this album has because of the individual quality of the pieces that makes it. One of those pieces is the bass. This record has great bass sound, and it really pops. It has a different approach that surprised me to a certain extent. I was expecting the album maybe to hide it a little bit more, to emphasize the guitars, emphasize the vocals, and push a little bit of everything else underneath it. It's not the case. The bass on this record, while not being one of the main protagonists of the sound, it does have a very important supporting role. It showcases itself in key moments of key songs in order for you to feel like there is a little bit more substance underneath the guitar sound, underneath the vocals, but also creating some interesting groovy melodies that add to the overall experience that the guitars and drums are offering to these tracks. So I was surprised, happily surprised, with the decision to go with this more emphasized bass sound throughout the entire record, because it had a positive impact on the sound and on the experience of listening to this album. And the same could be said for the guitars, but the guitars were more expected to do that. The guitar sound on this album is very driven. It has great solo sections. I felt like the solo sections were always very bright and always distance themselves from the rest of the sound within the songs, which to me is an important element. You want to create a little bit of separation between the two. It allows the songs to be more textured. It allows the song to have more peaks and valleys, if you will, and they're not as linear and they're not as stagnant. So the guitar sound on this record, as expected, really comes through, really shines, and propels this album forward more often than not. It has this ability to sound like a rock and roll album at times, but also sound heavy enough to not be just a pure rock and roll album. It finds its middle ground. It rediscovers itself with some elements of speed metal, some other elements of power metal mixed into that more classic heavy metal sound. And the guitars are really the barometer of where these tracks are going and what influence reigns more supreme on a song-by-song basis. The drums, similar to what you get out of the bass, they're there to really make the sound more compact, to give a little bit more shape to the way these songs are created, and they help that tremendously by not just filling in the back end of the song, not just creating a nice foundation for these tracks, but also allowing the guitars to be explosive but not dilute themselves. Because sometimes when you have records like this and you want to create a little bit more of a bigger sound experience, you start to dilute the guitar sound, and you can tell where the starting point is, but you can't see where the finish line is going to be because the guitars kind of lose themselves in this vacuum of space. So the drums on this record did a really good job creating some boundaries so that the guitars stay contained within those boundaries, explosive but contained within those boundaries. And that was a role that was really important from a drum standpoint, and I thought the drums were on point from start to finish. And then the last piece of the puzzle, the vocals. First of all, having the vocals on this record as predominant in the mix as they are, to me, is a winning formula. When you have a vocalist like this, you kind of have to give them a pedestal. You have to give them a platform. And creating a sound that's conducive to creating that same platform obviously enhances what the overall results are going to be. And vocally, this album really offers a lot. I love the range. I love how fluid it is. I love how dynamic it is. I love how much life it has. How vivid this album is vocally. And when I was talking about earlier about that old school feel without being dated, the vocals play a huge role in that. I mean, these vocals are a blast from the past. You don't see a lot of bands, modern bands, with vocalists that have this style, this approach, this almost Ronnie James Dio feel to it, and these guys do. So immediately when you hear a track, it doesn't matter if it has this incredible modern production behind it, the vocals alone allow you to navigate a little bit into deeper and older waters, which plays well once again into the discography and history of the band. An album that overall has really great songs, catchy, hooky, not just musically, but also vocally and lyrically. An album that has a lot of hooks. This is a very catchy and hooky album all around, like I said, musically and vocally, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel compact enough. Like I was talking about earlier about the guitar sound not having borders and kind of diluting itself, I feel the length of the album kind of dilutes the experience. It's hard for songs to stay memorable, even if they're super hooky and super catchy, when you have 12 songs in 52 minutes. It just becomes a lot for the listener to digest, and the individual qualities of some songs become lost in the overall collective, and that's the main problem of this record. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Hail to the Warriors. This is the opening song, amazing drum sound, really a full drum sound, if you will, and that really helps give volume and presence to the track. The great bass sound that this song also has creates this perfect bottom layer for the song, and then you have great melodies, great solo section, really explosive, and adding on top of that, you have a great vocal performance that has a lot of power and a great range. So when you think about an opening track that you want to set the table, you wanted to set the mood for what the whole record is going to be all about, Hail to the Warriors is a perfect song because it's a song that keeps the listener connected. Once you listen to this track as the opening track, you want to listen to more. You want to see what's coming down the line. You want to see what other songs are being offered on this record. So I honestly enjoy this track because not only of what it offers, but where it is in the tracking listing really helps the listener to stay with the album and move forward into the next track of this record. Next we have Mean Streets. This is one of my favorite songs on the entire album. It has it's super catchy, it's super hooky, it has a great tempo. The bass and drums together really help the back end of the sound once again to feel full, allowing the guitars to be more open. This is a track where the guitars are really open. They feel bright, they feel alive, but they're not constricting the sound. They're rather just opening up the doors, letting the air breathe, and letting the song breathe as well. And the vocals add to that same sense of openness that the track has. So you have both guitars and vocals creating a very similar experience, which is infusing a lot of light, a lot of energy, and letting the song breathe. The track has a great chorus, super vibrant, hooky, catchy, great mix of musical melody and vocal melody, connecting the two worlds together. It's an absolute metal banger, and it was one of those tracks that it didn't matter if I was listening to this album for the first time or the 10th time, this song remained in my memory because it really stood out due to the qualities that it possesses. Last but definitely not least, Lost Dreams, a more guitar-driven song, and then you have some bursts of heaviness coming into this track, disappearing from the track, coming into the track, allowing you to also feel the more dominant presence of the vocals throughout the entire song. So it's a track that has this speed metal feel to it, but then it infuses a little bit more heaviness into that speed metal and allows the vocals to kind of be the puppet master that pulls the strings of everything that this song has in store for you. Once again, a great chorus that puts a stamp on the song, and the vocals and guitars in the chorus really help define that specific moment of the track, which to me it's like the climax of the song, as it should be with any chorus, but really defined in this song. This is Riot with Mean Streets, once again on May 10th on Atomic Fire Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.